Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Gopalakrishnan. I am an undergraduate research assistant at the University of Colorado Boulder's Impact Facility, and I am honored today to be sharing my research with you that I've been doing for the past year on plasma charging inside lava tubes on the lunar surface. So to begin, lava tubes on the lunar surface are hypothesized to form during planetary formation, similar to on Earth. So on the left here, you can see this is a terrestrial lava tube. This is a picture taken in Hawaii. If you go to Hawaii, you can even visit these in person. They're pretty cool. And so here, this is a lava tube skylight. So the bottom floor has broken off, and the exposed magma is exposed on the bottom. And these terrestrial lava tubes are also, many of them have little caverns and cave conduits that are interconnected underneath. And on the right here, this is a lunar lava tube. This is an image from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter camera. And you can see it shares many similarities in the. And so these lunar lava tubes have a larger depth to opening radius ratios than typical craters, which means that they may be able to shield the bottom from the harsh space environment above, including radiation and micrometeoroid impacts. There's a very new study that came out also that includes lunar reconnaissance radar data, and it shows actually these little cave conduits off the side of a lunar lava tube. And so these could be very viable regions for lunar habitation, but the plasma charging environment needs to be investigated first. Last year, Nakazona et al., they made a numerical simulation that estimated the potential at the bottom of these lava tubes when the solar wind was at perfect incidence. And what they found was that the bottom surface may reach highly positive values. Here it's at 700 volts compared to the surface. And so I began my laboratory experiment by placing an idealized model of a lava tube inside of Impact's Colorado Solar Wind experiment here at the top. And so to kind of explain the setup here a little more, get out of the way, sorry. Can I take this? So I have an insulating plate here that I have a glass tube placed inside of, flush to the surface. A single-sided planar Langmuir probe is at the bottom of the lava tube and acts as the bottom surface. And I'm able to vary this depth to the opening as well. Attached to the insulating surface is a conducting plate, which I use to bias negatively to simulate different debye shielding effects and restrict electron flow into the lava tube. Over here, I have a little table that shows some of the plasma parameters from the Colorado Solar Wind experiment. Mainly to note is that I am using ion energies of 100 to 800 electron volts. And the Colorado Solar Wind experiment produces electrons in two thermal populations, cold and hot. And so here I am plotting the measured bottom lava tube potential as a function of ion beam energy. The different axes are different depths, and the different colors are different surface biases. The red being the low negative surface bias scenario at -5 volts, and the green and the blue being -40 and -70 volts, the highly negative surface bias scenarios. So from this graph, we can pull out many conclusions. So the first one is that the bottom lava tube potential is positive. What this indicates is that the ion flux is greater than the reduced electron flux at the bottom of the lava tube. Another conclusion we can make is that the bottom potential increases with the ion beam energy. This corresponds with the bottom surface becoming more positive in order to repel the high energy ions and to attract the electrons inside of the tube. And then the third result we can pull out from this is that the bottom potential becomes more positive as the entrance surface bias becomes more negative. This follows directly from result 2. As the entrance surface bias becomes more negative, more electrons are restricted from entering the lava tube. And so the bottom surface must become more positive in order to repel those high energy ions. Here I plotted that same bottom lava tube potential specifically for the low surface bias scenario, and I plotted it as a function of the depth of the Langmuir probe. The different colors here correspond to different ion beam energies. And from what we can see from this is that the bottom lava tube potential increases as the depth increases. And the previous numerical simulations have actually shown this as well in a different relationship. But what they showed is that the electrons are deposited onto the lava tube's sidewalls due to their thermal motions. So something we noticed is that we expected highly positive surface potential values at the bottom when nearly all the solar wind electrons are shielded from the entrance. However, in those previous plots, we don't see that. So this led us to realize that the additional electron population must be required, and we hypothesized these to be secondary electrons generated inside of the lava tube. And since solar wind electrons are mostly shielded, they contribute a negligible amount to the secondary electrons, and so we don't consider those. However, this means that those secondary electrons are likely generated from the ion collisions with the lava tube's sidewalls, which then produces the secondary electrons, which are attracted to the positively charged bottom surface. So here I'm showing the partially shielded electron scenario. This is with the -5-volt surface bias. And so with this, we can see a few interesting characteristics. So first, this is on the left here, a characteristic current voltage measurement from the Lunar probe. It's just biasing the probe to different potentials and measuring how much current is collected. And what we can see is that if we look at the solar wind electron energy of 0.5 eV, we see this deviation in the graph, which corresponds to collecting the solar wind electrons, meaning we're not fully shielding them from the bottom. However, if we look at the equilibrium potential, they do not match with the solar wind electron current. This means that the secondary electrons must be the other electron population that is required for maintaining current balance. On the right here, I plotted the current that the Lunar probe collected as a function of the ion beam energy for 2 different depths. The red points here mark the amount of ion current or total current that the probe measured, and then the blue is the solar wind electron current, and the purple is the secondary electron current. And we can notice that this is non-trivial. If we look at the fully shielded electron scenario with the -40 and -70 volt surface biases, we see virtually no deviation in the graph at the solar wind electron energy, which is where we came to the conclusion that we're pretty much fully shielding out the solar wind electrons. This means that the only significant electron population is from those secondary electrons that were generated. In that brand new study, what we've seen is that these lava tubes can have many different geometries. As you can see from, these are reconstructed models from the radar data. And so future work that we wish to do is to vary the geometry of the physical model to see how the plasma environment changes. But through this study that I've done so far, we've experimentally investigated this plasma environment at the bottom, and we've concluded that the bottom lava tube potential is positive and both increases with the ion kinetic energy and the lava tube depth. The bottom potential we only found to be moderately positive due to the additional secondary electrons that were generated from the ions colliding with the lava tube sidewalls. And hopefully this provides insight into the radiation environment at the bottom of lava tubes and also their assessment towards lunar habitation. Thank you so much, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Are there any in the room?
There is one in the room.
Yeah, so you said that you expected very positive potentials and you only saw moderately positive potentials. And I was wondering, what is the boundary between very positive and moderately positive?
So I guess that's a very relative terminology there, what I'm using. So in Nakazono's numerical simulation paper, we say highly positive potential values because the bottom surface potential was reaching values comparable to the ion kinetic energies. And so that's what I meant by highly positive. And then for moderately positive, these values that I was reaching are nowhere near the ion kinetic energy. And so they're significantly lower.
So like an order of magnitude off, or?
So it kind of depends on the, sorry, let me here. So it depends on the ion beam energy. So for example, for the 100 EV run, we were seeing values on the order of like 60 volts or so. So that's about half of the ion beam energy. So that's only slightly lower. Whereas for the 800 electron volt run, we're only seeing values of close to 120 volts. So it's significantly lower than the ion beam energy.